Welcome to the Combot Collective.
Hello and welcome to the Combot Collective, covering everything you want to know in the world of robot combat, from the heavyweight class to the fleaweight class, from Battlebots to the live circuit. I am your usual host, Sterling Brown, of course, former writer at Third Law Sports and current runner of King of Draft and current Battlebots moderator. This is a bit of a live event catch-up episode for us as we take a quick look at the Robots Live Crawley event that happened all the way back in October, and then have a deep focus on the Saudi Arabian Robots Live Championship that happened a month later in November. Outside of Battlebots back in August, these were the first heavyweight competitions during this calendar year of robot combat, and really the very first heavyweight events outside of Battlebots since the pandemic really began. I mean, of course, we've had events like Robots Ruckus and the South Florida Fair and other events since then, but Robots Live, first to jump on it with the Saudi event and, of course, the event in October, the ones we're covering here. And for these two events and for all future heavyweight events, we'll be taking all main competition records into account for the 2021 and 2022 heavyweight standings sheet that we're making, which will account for all wins and losses this year on a specialized ranking sheet that will kind of be taking over for the TCC 10 once the Battlebots regular season concludes. Hopefully by the end of this calendar cycle, when we get a lot closer to the 2022 Battlebots filming, we'll have a good idea of the big picture heading into this 2022 to 2023 calendar. If you're enjoying this episode, please check out our live event analysis with Robot Ruckus, as mentioned earlier, and of course, please check out our TCC 10 breakdown of news and prediction episodes for the Battlebot season going on right now. We're staying busy here at the Combot Collective, and we hope that you keep staying along for the ride. Now, let's dive into the UK scene for the very first time here at TCC. We're starting with a brief analysis of Robots Live Crawley in October, and then addressing the winners of the event, and then we'll be taking a good look at Celebration Riyadh. And before we start, of course, I want to give a huge shout out to Rob Taylor-Hasting with his Instagram at Adventure in Robots, which of course I'll put in the description below. You need to check this guy out. He does absolutely fantastic stuff. This was originally supposed to be a Crawley specific episode with the Saudi event taking a bit of a side view, but due to issues of me not being able to find anyone or to get permission to have the footage of the Crawley event, relying on pictures as you'll see in a second, I decided to put more focus on the Saudi event since Rob has been absolutely helpful in every asset with it. He said all footage is fair game, get it out there. If you need any help, let me know. So he's an absolute stud of a guy. Hopefully we can have him on in a future episode or something. But let's not waste too much time here and start talking about some robot fighting here as we jump into Robots Live Crawley. Before we jump into this event, some quick notes here. While I do believe we do have the near full footage of this event, Team Panoramic, the usual recorders of these competitions, only attended day 2, and it is unknown if the footage I got from Team Ironclads did not have everything. I believe that they had most of everything from day 1. We might have a couple matches missing from this overall win-loss record sheet that we'll be posting later, but there's only so much we can do with the info we have. And another thing, of course, exhibition fights that happen at these events, like the big heavyweight rumble, like the big featherweight rumbles, like the big series of exhibitions between Vulcan 1.0 and Apollo, who we'll get to later on, but in this stuff, those are all exhibitions. Those won't count towards the records. But without further ado, let's talk about the fights that do count. We had a very interesting field, big tip of the hat to all the robots that ended up showing up to this event, and a bigger tip of the hat to all the robots that ended up finishing at this event. Looking at our top 4 standings here, in 4th place we have the perennial Battlebots hopeful two-headed Deathflamingo. In 3rd place, the full combat front hinge from Team Invade Ignition. The runner-up in 2nd place, the always dominant force, always powerful in the UK, Iron All 6. It's a Robot Combat Hall of Famer. And another robot I believe is in the Robot Combat Hall of Fame. Our 1st place, it was always going to be this robot, the only robot you can realistically see winning most of these events. And unironically, in my opinion, one of the best robots in the world today, but we'll get to more of that in a second. Placing first at this event was, of course, Eruption. As we begin to run down the 25 competitors during this event, let's start with the series of robots that were fairly new, fairly unproven coming into this. Talking about Capers at 0-2, a robot that was recently bought by A brand new team. This was an older heavyweight that hasn't fought in a few years. I have no clue what this robot used to be, but now it's fighting as capers. Just unknown even to me, which is really surprising. But it's a Saint Aggro double flipper style robot, fairly wide base. It showed really good durability in both of its fights. Of course, this is a sportsman competition, but still looked fairly solid. Got a couple of flips in. I like the headlights, but didn't end up doing too much in a winless run here, going 0-2. Other robots that did go winless though, we had a few middleweights in this competition. Do want to give a quick shout out to Backflip and Audacious. Audacious is the right word if you're a middleweight entering a heavyweight competition. I believe these robots collectively went like 0-3, 0-4, all by knockout. But it's cool to see that they were bold enough to try entering the arena for these competitions. Some other heavyweight robots that made their debut at this event though were robots from veteran teams like Team Gabriel and Team Immersion, bring in robots like Uriel and Ember respectively. And speaking of Uriel here, we'll start off by talking about Team Gabriel, of course, Robot Wars fan favorites. Everyone knows Gabriel, one of the true pioneers of the HDPE, huge style, big wheels. Not a good event for them. Uriel finishing 0-2, Gabriel finishing 0-2. Uriel, of course, a brand new robot for this competition. It's under the same vein as the Huge or Gabriel or Wumbo style of robots, but instead this robot's springing the axe. It has a big overhead hammer instead of your usual Twackbot hammer or even a vertical or horizontal spinner like we see on American designs. A bit of just a bonking hammer. Doesn't seem like it has the right leverage to be doing some big damage, but this is a Robots Live event. It's not as serious as other events, but the robot did not perform well, got knocked out in both of its fights, stranded on the outer arena wall, I believe, in both of its appearances. And Gabriel, not much luck themselves, of course, going, like I said, going 0-2. You know, they had some really good twacking in the fights, of course, as always, but kind of just floated around for that first fight. Had some potential to win that second fight that they were in, but got sent out of the arena by Mammoth, and I think in the final minute of the fight. Just not much good luck for the Callias team here. Hopefully we can see them come out in the future. We know that Gabriel does have some striking power, and we do know the team is working on yet another heavyweight, so it's going to be really intriguing to see what that bot ends up coming out as we talk about another team that kind of disappointed here with their brand new robot. Yes, another team that also did not do too well, kind of didn't go to expectations at all, was Team Immersion, one of the most successful 30-pound teams in the world right now. They showed up with two of their front hinge flipper style robots, the ones that they're known for, of course, being Immersion, a robot that has recently won before Mechatrons back in January 2020, the Irish heavyweight event. And Ember, their brand new robot, looks absolutely beautiful. One of the most beautiful new robots I've seen this year. A robot that is rumored to actually be Abrasion. If you remember 2020 Battlebots before COVID, Abrasion, one of the British teams accepted for Battlebots that year before the pandemic hit. We're still waiting on that robot to show up. Hopefully we will see in the Battlebots before it's all said and done. People did rumor, though, Abrasion was actually Ember with a different name. It is unknown if that's true or not, since Ember is red and Abrasion was supposed to be like a bluish color. Things changed, of course, in the design process, but it didn't seem to matter much here because Ember ended up finishing 0-1 with a judge's decision. Had some real trouble getting under anything in its only appearance. I think that's probably why it ended up only fighting once in main competition. And same with former Mechatron's champion Immersions, who, like we talked about just earlier, had a bit more of a spirited showing than its younger brother, of course, a bit more veteran experience behind the wheel. They had some flips in, they had some rams and slams in. I actually don't really know why they didn't continue with fights here. We know that they did go 0-1. And we do know the most notable thing they did do at this event was getting pelted by Thor in their only melee, a fight that Thor won. Thor absolutely went to town on this robot during a good chunk of the fight. It's a perfect shape for a robot like Thor just to come in, wham, 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 land strike after strike. But we'll get to Thor here in a minute. Bit of a disappointing 0-2 appearance here for Team Immersion. Hopefully we'll see better from them in the future. We likely will, especially with their Labman Fight Fest stuff. Another team bringing new robots with old names is Team Shock here, another Robot Wars fan favorite. You know them from stuff like Aftershock and Shockwave. Team Shock completely remade both of their main live event flippers here. Of course, Tectonic, their newer one, and Manta, a former UK champion, I want to say. I know that they have won plenty of events in the past with that robot. But overall, the team finishes 2-3. Not a terribly good record, not a terribly awful record. Tectonic finishing 1-2, and Manta a 1-1. With Manta's only win coming at a bit of good fortune. The big story here is the issue with both of these robots. Manta came in looking like one of the sleekest rebuilds out of all the rebuilt robots in this competition. It had the all black, looked beautiful, but it had some serious flipper issues out of the gate in both of its fights. It just did not have the power to even self-ride, it looked like. It just shot out CO2, did absolutely nothing. Like I said, barely had trouble self-riding. And in fact, in its only win, it would have been knocked out by Tango of all robots if Gabriel didn't free it by accident. Which ended up not paying off well for Gabriel because Manta ended up setting it out of the arena. Probably the reason why they ended up winning that fight. Manta, though, 1-1, not looking good at all. Hopefully we can see them fix it up. But Tectonic, on the other hand, making a bit of a different impression, looking really sleek in the silver wedge, proving a silver box can look good if you do it right. Shouts to Retrograde and Tectonic for that. I love the sleek silver steel look and design. Just looked really good, straightforward, very classic Robot Wars look. But talking about its performance, it did manage a win and it managed to stay in the fight in both of its losses. But just like Manta's flipper, it lacked some serious firepower, especially in the latter half of its fights. You could really see the CO2 tank going down, and that's not an uncommon thing by any means with these robot fights. You'll see that a lot as we talk about these matchups here. But Manta, of course, and Tectonic, Manta primarily, but Tectonic, like I said, also having some issues getting up. Just was really more of a lifter in all of its fights. Feel like this robot could have won a lot more, I should say, but just couldn't get it going here. Team Shock, though, they're always back at these events, and I'm sure we'll see them better than ever. There were a handful of robots, though, getting away from specific teams here, that did finish about in their average spot. Plenty of veteran robots. Robot Wars OGs, in fact, like Team Onslaught's Kapow, and of course, Thor, the oldest heavyweight Axebot in the world right now. Both of those robots finishing at 1-2. Thor, of course, really shining in its only win. We talked about it just a few seconds ago with Immersion. Just laid the axe strikes down on Immersion and Ignition and during that fight. But ultimately was outmatched by flippers in later fights. Just hard to get around flippers in matchups like that. Those are just more impactful flips over axe strikes in terms of the judges. And then we also have Toxic 2, a former UK champion with a respectful 2-1. But this team needs to get more careful with their accuracy, I believe. Of course, Team Toxic, a very, very old school team since the early Robot Wars days. One of the true live event OGs. And one of the most powerful flippers at this event, probably the most powerful flipper besides the eventual runner-up, who we'll get to in a moment. But yeah, a lot of misfires here by Toxic 2, and I think this robot just could use a little bit more control when it's trying to fight its opponents. Could get it to another event championship sooner rather than later, potentially. And while we had some average performers, we also had some below average performers here, and some of those robots, some real fan favorites. Like one of the big announcements when this event came out was that Nuts, of course, Robot Wars Series 10 third place, was going to be at this event. I believe it was the Series 8 version, though, and it was showing. It was a very rough 0-3 outing, having serious issues getting up to full speed in a sportsman-style UK live tour arena. Of course, also don't have any mini-bots to slow up opponents down. And, this is a non-spinner event. This is a sportsman-style event, so there's also not any real weapon chains to snipe. You're not going to get under a flipping arm like that and maybe snipe an arm or a cord or a cable or something like that. But we didn't see that at all. Nuts ended up going 0-3, I believe the worst record overall of the entire competition. Though they were very spirited. I think they only got knocked out once. It's just a shame. Sportsman competitions really neutered Nuts, in my opinion. Neutered the potency of Nuts. And the upsets, we've seen it pull off before. But speaking of upsets, another robot that we do see, another fan favorite here on the other end of the spectrum, is the Battlebots veteran Nelly the Ellibot, who finishes at 0-1, the same record we saw it finish in its last appearance back in 2019 at the FRA Championship, but did look slightly better than an FRA Championship setup where it was swinging its axe like a madman, but knocked itself out so quickly here. Axe wasn't as powerful, but they got it kind of balanced out a bit better, which is a good thing. Plenty of axe swings, none of them hit a robot. Not one of them hit a robot for the minute it was alive. And then the moment Nelly did hit a robot, the moment they did hit, I believe it was two-headed Death Flamingo, they died on impact, just got kind of shoved to the outer wall. And they didn't appear again in the competition outside of a melee where they got thrown out of the arena by Eruption immediately. It's a bit of a shame. I think that Nelly does have some serious potential, but here we only saw them lose their eye and then lose their drive again. It's a bit of a shame. You know, maybe we'll see them in Battlebots in the future. Who knows? But I do want to see a lot coming out of Nelly. Sarah is a real sweetheart of a driver. A couple of other robots that we knew have a bit of a history and a pedigree in robot combat are the bots like Behemoth and Turbulence, which collectively finished 0-3. Behemoth finishing 0-2, Turbulence 0-1. Of course, Behemoth looking okay. It didn't look terrible, but got pitted in its very last fight it had against fellow Series 2 veteran King Buxton. It made me super excited to see King Buxton and Behemoth in the same arena again, all the way in 2021. And of course, the rebuilt former UK champion Turbulence 0-1, and it looked really sluggish in its brand new rebuild. Just had nothing going on in it at all. But both these robots also appear in the Celebration Riyadh event, which we'll be talking about more in depth, so we'll cease discussion on them for now. Moving on, though, to some robots that actually did impress at this event, really caught me off guard, had me by surprise, had me quite excited. First off, another robot that we do see in Saudi Arabia, Apocalypse, who, despite his 0-1 finish, looked incredibly aggressive and durable in its only fight. I lost to King Buxton, which totally shocked me on itself. King Buxton, of course, finishing 2-1. But during that fight against King Buxton and a few other robots, Apocalypse, super aggressive, swinging its axe around, just going full on. I think the axe even snapped off at the start of that fight, and they just kept swinging it around like a mace. It was really cool to see how far Apocalypse has come in this new design, and we see it more, like I said, in the Saudi events. They've progressed a lot at there, but we'll get to that in a moment. King Buxton, who, like I said, a 2-1 finish, probably my biggest shock of the season of the year so far. These guys just look really good. Lifts in both of their wins. I don't even think they got knocked out once. They were just outplayed by Ignition, I believe, in one of their fights. But highlight of the event for me easily was their last fight, their third fight. It was a battle between, I believe, Tectonic and Behemoth, still in the arena. There was one other robot that was already sent out. But Tectonic and Behemoth still in the arena. Final minute of the fight, a double pitting, fantastic driving by side here from King B. Shoved Behemoth in the pit, juked out of the way. Tectonic drove itself into pit. That's how King B got its second win of the night here, and it looked absolutely fantastic. King Buxton really needed a bit of relevance like this. They couldn't get into Battlebots with Hooligan. The last time they were really in the scope, the public scope, the mainstream scope of robot combat was back in 2018 when they showed up at Robo Games and fought bots like Minotaur, Tora Maximus, I'm sorry. And moving on to our top four here, starting with fourth place, two-headed Death Flamingo, who fooled many fans, convincing a lot of fans they were at Battlebots this year. Not really, but they did win a lot of fans over with this event, finishing with supposedly a 1-2 record with this place and the third place. I feel like I'm missing some info because both these records don't seem right, but I digress. Two-headed Death Flamingo did look really solid in the fights it did have. With its Soul Melee winning it, dominating it, it really reminded me of Warhead in Battlebots 2018 with the wide wings, straight up T-posing with the dinosaur head. Warhead proved that those wide wings ended up being really good for being a control bot. They just sort of dominated the presence of the arena, swarmed opponents, sucked them into corners, and that's what two-headed Death Flamingo did. They used that little pecking hammer thing pretty well in all their fights. Easily won that melee. And then they had two 1v1s, one against Eruption, one the third place playoff against Ignition. So Team Invade really took care of them. But two-headed Death Flamingo looked really solid here. One thing I will say, though, is they probably should keep the wings on. They tried running no wings against Ignition, and they were wheeling so bad in that fight. Looked like 2020 Pain Train out there, really. But I digress. Two-headed Death Flamingo has a lot of potential. Maybe a robot we'll see in Battlebots in 2022, 2023. We'll just have to see. Now, we'll talk about third place in just a moment, but we're going to jump to the runner-up spot here. We have Iron 6, who finishes with a 2-1 campaign, and easily the best flipper power of the entire event. This flipper power is, in my opinion, you can compare this to Bronco, you can compare this to Hydra, you can compare this to Blip, you can compare this to all the heavy hitters in Battlebots right now in terms of flipping power, because there are some real crackhead flips being shot up, especially in Iron All 6's second fight here. It finishes with a 2-in-1 campaign, and we've seen this robot shoot robots into the ceiling before. I believe these guys are still the defending FRA UK champions. Of course, no FRA championship in 2020 for obvious reasons. You know, they were throwing robots like Eruption, Thor, Tectonic all over the arena, and scoring some big time out of the arenas in the process. The only thing that really stopped it from winning the title here was just simply being outplayed by Eruption in the championship. We've seen those robots fight tons of times, and it's always a coin flip as to who wins. Eruption, the better bot here, but Team Iron Awe, this is one of the most old school teams of Robot Combat. Go all the way back to before Series 4 when these guys were fighting in the live scene with their Axe bot. The original Iron Awe 6 now, the Great Pyramids, showing up and showing out with a second place finish. Congratulations to them. And now, as we close off this Crawley segment here with our last two robots to really talk about, the last two I want to highlight, we jump back to third place as the incredibly decorated Team Invade has finished with both bronze and gold here. Third place and first place in this event. These guys are just, it's so dominant, it's silly in the UK. I mean, really. I mean, I may have some missing data here because Ignition is my third place, but they do have a 1-3 record from what I've seen. Might have a fight incorrect, might have some judges' decisions missing here. But they got third place, look really good. Well, probably the best front hinge in the world right now, as much as I do love P1. I think Ignition does have more of a tankier style. And the non-exposed wheels do probably play a factor. I would love to see Ignition versus P1 as a fight down the line. But I digress. We also have a champion here, Eruption, 4-0, a perfect Battlebot season back in 2019. These guys looked absolutely dominant with Eruption, as they always do, and essentially walked to the Crawley title until the finals, because Iron All did put up a good fight. I'll give them credit for that. But dominant as usual, out of the arenas on robots like Two-Headed Death Flamingo, Backflip, other flippers, and eventually, like I said in the final, an incredible finesse knockout on Iron All 6. It was in the final minute of the fight, and Iron All was clearly low on fumes. They weren't flipping to the power they needed to. Eruption propped them in the corner, got them caught up on that arena pulverizer they have, and counted them out for a pretty exciting final. It's one of the more exciting fights in the event. It's always exciting when the finals is one of the better fights. But really good finesse knockout, and the defending Robot Wars champion, the Series 10 champion, ends up being the defending FRA champion to take first place home here. And I really hope Battlebots is watching this. I really hope Battlebots is watching Eruption. I also really hope they're watching Iron Awe, but I feel like Iron Awe might have trouble. It just doesn't have the same character as Eruption, and really just Eruption has been more consistently successful if you look at the past few years. Eruption, of course, or Ignition, really, just anyone from Team Invade. I really do believe that Team Invade is the most successful team in Battlebots right now to not be competing in Battlebots. I'm sorry, the most successful team in Robot Combat right now to not be competing in the heavyweight Battlebots competition. And I heard some rumors from people saying that they don't want to compete in Battlebots, which might be true, and if that is, more power to them. But if they're watching this somehow, and I know they are, think about it. We love you in America. We want to see Eruption or Ignition fight some big name robots. So please come here sooner rather than later. Same with you, Greg Munson and Trey Rusky. I hope you're listening to this. Send them the invite. I don't care if they send an application or not. Send them some money so we can get Eruption and Battlebots. As we wrap up Crawley here, congratulations again to our top three, Eruption, Iron All 6, and Ignition. Very good group of robots. And another shout out to Tango, who announced that they will be retiring at this event. Another robot we're seeing retiring alongside bots like Duck and Monty. Sad to see, but it was a very efficient wedge bot, and we'll see plenty from Team Panoramic in the future. Like I said at the top of the episode, this was going to be more of a Crawley-based focused event. Due to issues with getting footage, I have made it more of a Saudi-focused episode here. But that was originally not the plan. When I talked to Robots Live during a DM I had before making this episode, they said that this isn't really a proper competition. It's more of an exhibition event here to show off sort of what Robot Combat is to Asia, and more specifically what it is to Riyadh. Of course, the big celebration event for Saudi Arabia and their culture. Doing this event here, they probably paid the team good money to show up. So shouts to Robots Live for making that bang. But I digress. Does this, of course, all those make sense because, only Make Robotics, Team Hertz, Team Apollo, and Team Asgard showed up. 4 teams made up this 10 robot field. And because of this, the whole regular season of the event will not count towards our overall heavyweight standings, and we won't be talking about them here, obviously, because of incomplete footage, the fact that there were nearly 100 of these fights, and they were really friendly rounds. Sometimes they were one-on-one, sometimes they were 3-ways, sometimes they were 4-ways, so it's a bit iffy, a bit floaty at how it all works, but that being said, we did factor in the Final 8 bracket as its own competition, and those fights will be on our standings and will be the ones that we're going to break down right now as we jump into the main 8-robot tournament of Celebration Riyadh at Robots Live. And now, starting off talking about these 10 competitors, we start off here talking about the 2 robots that did so poorly, unfortunately, during the regular season at Saudi Arabia that they did not even make the 8-robot tournament. The 2 robots left out, of course. Funny enough, the 2 robots we were talking about, kind of underwhelming at Robots Live Crawley, had trouble getting it together here. These robots, of course, being Behemoth and Turbulence, with a pair of underwhelming performances here, sadly. Turbulence and Behemoth had some major success in Europe, of course. Behemoth, like I said earlier, the joint 3rd place Robot Wars champion, and Turbulence, a former UK champion, but both robots were just not going at all here in their Asian debuts. Behemoth was reportedly dealing with some serious drive and power issues, making Make Robotics just have a headache during this entire event, really. Behemoth was reportedly dealing with some serious drive and power issues, miring Make Robotics during the entire competition. Not the only robot having this issue, though. In fact, Behemoth and Taylor-Hasting had a play-in fight for the final seed, where Taylor-Hasting just managed to outlimp Behemoth to the finish. As you can see right here, it was just bit of a slow fight, not the fight you'd expect from 2 Robot Wars OGs like that, but that's just sort of what comes sometimes in robot combat. The other robot, Turbulence, who, like I said, completely rebuilt for these new events, it did not look like it. It looked like it was the 2006 robot going out there, because they were definitely experiencing what the name implies, turbulence. It just did super mediocre at this event, and it's in the year so far in general, just it's been more of a push bot than a flipper, and that's not what you want to hear from a former UK champion flipping robot like Turbulence. But, it's been completely rebuilt for 2021. Hopefully they can get these gremlins out in the future. And hopefully this will end up being a small sample size for this brand new Turbulence, as both these robots finished with abysmal records, out of the competition completely. But we do have 8 robots that did make the field, so let's jump into those now. And now, looking at the first half of the field, we're going to jump into our quarterfinalists here. Monty, Vulcan 1.0, Taylor-Hasting, and Apocalypse. Starting off with Monty, who finishes 0-1 with 1 judge's decision. It's one of the only twack bots in the UK heavyweight scene, if not the world today. A lot of the UK scene regulars are super familiar with it. It's always been a bit of a field filler for Robots Live events. Built back in 2014 by Team Apollo, and has fought pretty much everywhere on that half of the globe, from Russia to UK to Ireland, and now to Saudi Arabia, making its Asian debut here. And we talked about a few weeks ago on a TCC news segment, this robot was actually sold to a brand new team lately, or at least a husk of it. We don't know exactly where this robot is going to end up, whether it be US, probably still in the UK. Hopefully we'll still see it competing. But talking about what it did here at Saudi Arabia, during the regular season, Monty had a very humble 3 wins, which allowed it to sneak into the bracket. I want to say at the 7th seed, might have been the 8th seed, but I might be incorrect. Though it did manage to pick up wins against some fledgling robots like the ones we just talked about, Taylor-Hasting, Turbulence, Behemoth in the main rounds. But the big quality for a bot like Monty in a Brit Flipper heavy field is that a robot like Monty is just, it's hard to flip. There's not a lot of surface area there. All the focus is on that long, twacking arm. And in its only bracket fight against teammate Apollo, that was shown a little bit. Apollo struggled to get under Monty for a little bit of the fight, the first opening half. It allowed Monty to get it got a few stray strikes on Apollo, but ultimately, you just can't keep up with Apollo. It's the UK champion, a former UK champion, I should say. And Apollo eventually got control of the fight, got a feel of Monty, and started throwing the robot around. Pretty sure these robots have fought plenty of times in the past, so probably was fairly easy business for Apollo. They gave Apollo the judge's nod after the full 3 minutes. And as for Monty, who knows where this version of the robot's going to end up. Like I said, we do know that Apollo themselves are working on a new version of Monty that's going to be competing in Robots Live events. So Monty themselves not fully retiring, I bet will be competing in future live event competitions with Robot Live. We'll probably even see them later in the year, this new version of Monty. Very fascinated to see how that will end up looking. And now moving to Vulcan 1.0, going from a Twackbot to an Axbot here. Vulcan 1.0, another robot coming from Team Apollo and a regular at both Robots Live and King of Bots events. This, of course, is not the most recent version of Vulcan, as a lot of King of Bots fans know, but Vulcan 1.0 in itself, which is still probably one of the more potent axe/hammer bots in the world today. Very consistent, very formidable axe, and a very sturdy plow that can take a lot of spinner impacts up front. Of course, rocking the Union Jack. We don't see this robot fight very often in a competitive setting, I should say, because we saw it in past Robots Live events back in 2019, 2018, and we saw it even at the 2020 Crawley event that usually they have Vulcan 1.0 and Apollo just fighting each other again and again and again in a series of exhibitions, which is you know, it's exciting for the first fight, then it's like, all right, we've seen them fight before. But I digress. You know, they do it for live tours, so I get why they do it. Moving forward here, though, to more of the fighting, it did. Met up in round 1 against fellow King of Bots regular and Tante, playing the bottom seed. The fact Vulcan 1.0 almost missed the bracket like Behemoth and Turbulence, snuck into the field with 4 wins, which may not seem like a lot, but when you're fighting such a stacked field with robots like Taylor-Hasting, Apollo, and Tante, it's going to be hard to pick up consistent wins, especially for an X-Bot. You're in an arena with no hazards, no pit, no floor spikes. It's literally a box without the arena zone, so it was always going to be tricky. But despite that, it did look impressive in this round 1 fight against fellow King of Bots regular Tante. It landed an array of axe strikes, but it wasn't doing too much in terms of damage with the flipper. Tante, of course, very well built from Team Sabretooth, Team Hertz. The geometry of Vulcan ended up leading it to get caught up on a few bits of the arena during this fight. And ultimately, things like that ended up causing it to lose this top 8 matchup by judge's decision. It just got out-flipped, out-controlled. We saw it like with Monty and Apollo in that first fight. It's just going to be a very hard world for the Axe Bots. Or at least you would think so when we look at our eventual champion here, who we'll get to shortly. But now let's talk about another Axe Bot in Taylor-Hasting. And of course, talking about John Reed's Taylor-Hasting, one of the most successful Axe Bots in the world, one of the most popular Axe Bots in the world, certainly one of the most popular in the UK. A former UK champion in the live tours and a former Robot Wars Grand finalist in both the reboot and the classic series. This is actually their first time competing in non-European soil for the first time in this robot's 20-year career, which is a little exciting. But a lot like Robot Wars OG Behemoth, these guys had technical issues throughout the entire event, limped their way, ended up losing fights to robots like Monty. Which just shows you how things are going for that robot. It's a bit unfortunate, but Taylor-Hasting did, like I said, end up sneaking in with the play-in victory against Behemoth, getting them that 8th seed. And then in this fight, it did not look like they were having those issues. It looked like that whatever issues they had, whatever gremlins they had in the regular season, they got solved for this matchup against the brand new Orion, and even controlled the fight during the fight's early duration. Though in the final minute, Taylor-Hasting's axe strikes did begin to slow down. We saw some of that drudge that we heard about before. It ended up just being a lot like Vulcan versus Tante, Monty versus Apollo, Thor versus a bunch of those robots in the Crawley event. You know, it's just hard for the axe robot to get the same judges' points as the flipper does, and that's what ended up hindering Taylor-Hasting here. It's a real shame, but there really isn't much shame in losing to this new robot Orion, of course the sister robot to Apollo, robot which we'll get to just shortly. But it just hasn't been a lucky year for Team Hertz at all. You know, they had this bad event here. They went to Battlebots and they couldn't even show up due to visa issues. Beta was there waiting and waiting, but no Team Hertz, no Team Sabretooth to show up and work on the robots. It's a real shame, but hopefully things will look up for John Reed and the team here as they go into 2022. And now talking about Apocalypse, who in the main competition 0-1 with the judge's decision loss, has come a copious long way since we first saw it back at Robot Wars Series 10. I briefly touched on this in the Robot Wars quality thing, but in my opinion, out of a lot of the UK robots I've seen in these two events, Team Asgard's Apocalypse is easily one of the most improved heavyweights I've seen this year. It looks like Apocalypse is turning a bit of a new leaf this year in terms of reliability. It's a lot more straightforward and robust than years prior. And this one continues to be at that level. You know, it put up a 5-win regular season campaign to get into the second half of the seedings here for the main tournament. But it would get matched up against fellow overhead weapon and eventual Saudi champion Switch. And despite landing a couple axe strikes, the duration of this event would start showing some wear down on Apocalypse here. After a few swings, the weapon did appear to get stuck during a few moments of the fight. Most notably, panels of armor of Apocalypse were coming off some genuine damage during a sportsman fight, which is pretty exciting. This would later lead to some drive issues though for Apocalypse, and it would become a judge's decision loss for the Axe bot, but like I said, from what we saw in Crawley, what we saw here in Saudi Arabia, overall, if you count the regular season wins, this robot finished 5-2, and that's a really good look for it. In my opinion, one of the more improved robots for me that I've seen in the heavyweight class this year. You can put that robot up here with like bots like Fusion, King Buxton, and Claw Viper. These guys, all those robots that just wowed me in terms of like expectations for this year. You know, Fusion, of course, has been a combustible robot, big issues there. King Buxton has just never been able to have much offensive potential as a lifter. Claw Viper too, you know, they were just too fast for their own good, and Asgard was a bit too flimsy for its own good. All four of those robots, huge improvements, but I think Apocalypse might be the best of all of them. Really, it was a really solid Axbot performance. And while Turbulence isn't really doing too hot for Team Asgard, Apocalypse is, and it is really lovely to see. And now, as we jump into our two semi-finalists here, two very similar robots, Apollo and Orion here, both finishing 1-1. Apollo 1-1 with the judge's decision victory and a knockout loss, while Orion 1-1 with the judge's decision victory and a judge's decision loss. But starting with Apollo here, this robot needs very little introduction. One of the most popular UK flippers in the region today. Apollo, of course, the winner of Robot Wars Series 8 and the winner of numerous live events around the world, from Ireland to Russia. As both Apollo and Chronic, and most recently the King of Bots 2.0 championship with Vulcan 2.0, one of Apollo's many other sister robots. Apollo expectedly breezed out of the top 8 tournament. Breezed into the top 8 tournament, but I don't think many expected it to outperform its new sister robot Orion. Apollo managed 13 wins though, the most out of any robot during this Saudi regular season. Even getting a win against its younger sibling Orion, showing that, hey, the hype's not here just yet. It's still all about Apollo here. That's a big time win for them. And ultimately a good performance, but a surprisingly good performance, because just like Vulcan 1.0, this is a robot that has not fought in a regular streamlined competition in quite some time. Might even be since Robot Wars Series 10, because this robot is usually doing exhibitions against Vulcan only. Looked really good here though. The regular season translated to a first round decisive victory, judge's decision, of course, when they faced Monty. But then his run was quickly halted against the fellow world-traveled Brit flipper Tante, a battle of two real King of Bots OG teams right there. The Apollo versus Tante matchup was close, but ultimately it was in Apollo's favor, it seemed like, for a majority of it. Lots of big-time flips to Tante, and it looked like Apollo was just going to dominate the fight. But as we see in a lot of these UK fights, sometimes these robots' flipper systems just die. They power down, they break, and that's what happened here in the final 40 seconds of this matchup. Apollo's flipper just straight up stopped working, and that left Tante, you know, who still had some flipper power, to get in there, flip it over, and put it away. Just put it to sleep right then and there. So a bit of an upset, a late knockout victory, but Tante looking really good here after almost being sold a few years back. We'll get to them though here in a moment. Who knows if we'll see Apollo and Vulcan 1.0 in regular competition again this year, or even at some point in the future at all. It'll be quite fascinating to see what ends up happening now, especially now that we have Orion here, you know, the better in every way version of Apollo, you know, at least that's what they want it to be. But we're going to have to see. And speaking of, we now talk about Orion, who, like I said, finishing 1-1 with a judge's decision victory and a judge's decision loss. This is, of course, the twin to Apollo, the sister robot, and probably the most built-up robot coming into this competition. Orion was originally announced for the 2020 Battlebots season, just a few months after Vulcan 2.0's victory at King of Bots 2, and Orion was easily the most hyped-up newcomer competing at Battlebots over the past 2 years, even though not really a newcomer because they show up in 2015 as Chronic, but I digress. Orion now makes his debut here at at Saudi Arabia, hoping to sharpen its blade with a potential 2022 Battlebots appearance on the horizon here. Trying to get those reps in, trying to make itself a better robot, which always ends up working out, just like bots like Gigabyte and Tantrum in the past. Mad Catter 2, all bots that sharpen themselves. Deadpool as well, sharpen themselves with international competition, making themselves better. That's what Team Apollo is all about. But anyway, they ended up finishing their regular season with 12 wins, giving them the second seed with just 1 win short of their older twin Apollo, as who I mentioned ended up beating Orion in the regular season to get that top seed position. So despite some hiccups and losses, though, it was business as expected for the Apollo team with Orion, who boasted similar power and dominance to their sister robot Apollo, of course. But like I said earlier, it did stumble a bit out of the gate coming into this main tournament, as Taylor-Hasting, a robot that really struggled in the regular season, put up quite a fight against Orion here, but ultimately came up short as Orion advanced. But it wasn't so lucky facing another robot we're likely going to see in the future of Battlebots with Switch. Orion did manage a handful of impressive flips you would expect from Orion, especially in the opening half. But ultimately, it was seriously outwedged by Switch during a majority of the fight, and this led to Switch just absolutely wailing on Orion for a lot of the matchup, just peppering it in, like the old school Mortis style, just pepper pie it in. Deadlow as well is another robot that had that sort of mindset, just landing strike after strike after strike after strike, and it ended up kind of adding up because within the final 30 seconds of this matchup, Orion was pretty much completely immobile to barely immobile, as it was just sort of limping around the corner. Fight did, though, end up going to a judge's decision where Orion lost. So a few things to work out, losing to a bot like Switch, but that's exactly why Team Apollo really brought Orion to this competition to face some elite robots here. We're going to see now an even better Orion entering Battlebots in the future, and with every event that this robot competes in, we're going to see it get sharper and sharper. Same with the whole Apollo, Vulcan, Chronic lineup. This is the most evolved set of robots I think we've seen the past few years here, and it's probably going to be a real contender for the 2022 championship at Battlebots, if you ask me. But now it's time to move on to our final two, and a very solid final two this was. Our first finalist and runner-up here, Tante, ended up going 2-1 with 1 judge's decision win, 1 knockout win, and 1 very close judge's decision loss there in the finals. It was really one of the most popular robots on the King of Bots TV show, competed in all 3 of their seasons and even their 1 live event, and even tried to announce their retirement on King of Bots 2. Ultimately ended up competing again in the UK live tour after that, maybe just their Chinese retirement, who knows. And also was scheduled to appear at Battlebots 2020 as a backup robot, painted yellow and going by the name Chuck. But of course, due to COVID, this ended up not happening. But Tante did end up wearing that yellow Battlebots livery for this event and put up a Battlebots quality run here with 12 wins, just as many as Orion, finishing 3rd seed, I want to believe. And Tante in general has just been a Team Apollo killer for this entire event. Just look at round 8 and knocked out Vulcan 1.0 and then knocked out Apollo in the semifinals, but ended up getting kind of halted here by our other finalist and eventual champion Switch, which we have been talking about through this entire thing. 3-0 with 3 judges' decisions victories. It is one of the more intriguing stories of robot combat coming on here with Switch. Coming out of a portion of Make Robotics, primarily out of Team RC Kev, Switch competed in the latter 2 King of Bots events, did okay this fighting robots, but at King of Bots 2 really gained some infamy from it got eliminated in a competition where it went 2-0. Unfortunately, the team captain, which it ended up with, just didn't see any value in Switch, which was annoying to me and a lot of other international fans. Every time that there was an elimination round, he tried getting rid of Switch, even though it didn't fight. And this ended up causing teams like Tante and Double Barbecue to eliminate themselves in hopes that Switch could get a second chance. But Switch ended up going out anyway without 1 single fight because the team just refused to play him and constantly tried to eliminate him. Got him a bunch of notoriety, a bunch of fan support. There was a lot of Switchgate stuff online, especially on the Discord communities at the time. And I guess some of this fandom led it to getting qualified for Battlebots 2020 because like Orion, like Tante, like a bunch of the robots that we've talked about here, was supposed to come to Battlebots 2020 under the name Exchange with some modularity. Like I said, despite the sportsman rules, Switch really did end up making a lot of use out of their only weapon available with the hammer, managing to out-hammer Apocalypse in that very first round, fellow hammer bot there, and then managing to wear down the very hyped up Orion in that semifinals matchup. But now it had to face Tante here, and fittingly, the finals was easily the most contested fight of the entire bracket, with Tante absolutely dominating the very first half of the fight, with numerous throws that spiked Switch into the various arena walls. Switch, though, just like in its semi-final fight, really managed to capitalize on the fact that Tante was kind of wearing thin in terms of weapon power come the end of the fight. Had the same level of control and weapon usage we saw them use against Orion, as the fight would eventually run down to the full 3 minutes, with Tante just barely having enough battery power to make it the distance, and this ended up being a big intangible to decide who won this event. Because the fight ended up being so close that the Roboteer judges had to rewatch the entire fight and take account of every single strike by Tally to make sure they had the correct call. Eventually, though, Switch did end up winning a close but likely correct decision in my opinion, as damage was really laid into Tante, especially in the top and the flipper area during that final minute of the fight. But overall, it's super exciting to see Switch really get a bit of that justice it deserves. They're back in their country of Asia where they had this incident happen, and on their third trip over, they got some proper revenge. They won the first ever Saudi Arabian event, even though, of course, it was against a bunch of UK brethren. This still was all very exciting to see them get a bit of revenge over the Asian bedlam they dealt with last time internationally. And this is really good. I hope Battlebots was watching this. This was some proper competition here, and I would be seriously surprised if we don't see exchange there with bots like Orion and other teams that hopefully we can see appear at Battlebots in 2022. Before we finish up here, just some other words. Despite some controversy and some skepticism that was inevitably going to be had with this event due to the regime of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, there were some fans that were very dismissive of this event, and some were outright attacking Robots Live for doing this event. But despite that, I find all of that just to be fairly foolish, and a lot of that coming from a ton of people that have trouble separating the government of Saudi Arabia from the people of Saudi Arabia. Because, of course, I don't condone the actions and the very rough history of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that their government has done, all of that stuff. But that's all political. This is a Robot Combat podcast. And a lot of the people there, they feel the same way. They don't condone that. They don't think that should represent them as people. And a lot of those people attended this event. A lot of those people sat in the bleachers, and a lot of those people were probably fairly inspired from what they saw at this competition, Hopefully we can inspire some more people just from something like this to, pursue robotics, pursue more avenues like this. And that's what Robots Live was hoping for, I believe, I think we're going to see a proper scene come out of Saudi Arabia from this. We saw that they have this proper arena here now that can hold heavyweight action. Looks like it can take some solid impacts. So hopefully we can really see that stuff grow in terms of like small bots. And of course, in terms of a heavyweight scene, middleweight scene now, they have this arena. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we see future Battlebots applicants and maybe even future Battlebots competitors come from here. I do understand that the team has passed down the control of robot combat in Saudi Arabia to a gentleman, I believe, in the country that goes by Mazroa. So I give him the best of luck in continuing this scene, and hopefully this won't be the last time we'll be covering his region here, because this was an exciting little event. And of course, one more time, shouts to our top two in Switch and Tante as we wrap things up here in our second live event review. Thank you for staying with us to the end of this very hefty UK heavyweight live scene breakdown. 2 events in one here, 2 countries in one here as well. In fact, I want to give another huge thank you to Adventure and Robots for the incredibly well put together footage of this Saudi event on their Instagram. Of course, I will be linking their social media in the description below. And you can expect more live event breakdowns from the Combot Collective here with ones like this, and of course American ones like Robot Ruckus back in November. In fact, we'll be going back to Robot Ruckus with our next live event coverage, as we will be doing the South Florida Fair, and then after that going a bit more northeast as we do Motorama's events. You can look forward to those in the future. And as we have said in the past with these heavyweight events, these records for all of these competitions will be accounted for on a 2021 to 2022 heavyweight standings board. You can expect to be public fairly soon. And of course, you can expect many more major European combat robot events covered by us in the near future as we start moving out here. This has been Sterling Brown. As always, you can find me at SterlingTXTG on Instagram and in numerous other adventures in 2022. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Combot Collective, along with following both our Instagram and our Facebook, along with joining our Discord community as well. You can find all these in our Linktree below. Hope you enjoyed yourself, and we will see you next time.
This was the Combot Collective. Find us on Instagram and Discord.